Alright, so we're going to have 3 new releases this week. I was hoping it'd be 4, but predictably the card counter is nowhere around here, but hopefully that changes in the near future, I hope. So in the meantime, we'll just go with these three one-word titles, all of which are quite different. And of course, I want to start with Malignant, which is another theatrical release movie that's also on HBO Max. And this is a movie that have been excited for, despite not knowing at all what it was, right up until pretty much I saw it, because it's a James Wan horror movie. And we started doing these videos back in 2013, the year that The Conjuring came out. And I think in that video I made it pretty clear how I felt about James Wan, and how that has continued since then. I think he has to be one of the great horror directors that we have working right now. He's got such a... It's hard to say unique style because you can see some of his influences, but at the same time he has such a signature that you can tell a James Wan movie from like a mile away. There's, on top of his horror movies, there are some shots in this and some locations in this where I was even getting like Death Sentence vibes. So it's got him all over it. And of course I don't look at advertisements or anything like that, or trailers, so I was a little concerned when people were talking about the trailers and the TV spots and all that, and saying how generic it looked, and how it looked like any other horror movie that's come out in the past few years. And that was concerning, but I kept thinking, like, even if it looks generic in advertising, I can't imagine James Wan making an extremely generic and forgettable horror movie. Like, it's just, I can't wrap my head around that idea. So maybe there's something being lost in the advertisements, I would hope. And then sure enough, like right before it came out, like the day before it came out, I suddenly started hearing, oh, this is not what I thought it was at all. And everybody freaking out about how the advertisements were not the whole movie, it turns out. So, the question now is if what he has done here is completely successful, because there is a certain vibe you get immediately, and I can already see, like 2 minutes into the movie, you can tell how divisive this will probably be, and how this might not click with a lot of audiences, because when I talked about how you can see his influence here seems to be extremely specific. Because basically, it appears that he's trying to make some kind of B movie. Just a really mainstream B movie, complete with the bad acting and some of the really over-the-top, just the over-the-top nature in general right away. Even more so compared to his other movies. And usually his movies have really good performances in them, but you can tell the performances in this are deliberate, or at least they feel deliberate, when you kind of get a sense of the era of horror he was going for. So, and whether or not he accomplished that could be, it could sound like I'm making excuses or being, an apologist, because I love just Juan in general so much, and that I was going to love this regardless of how it turned out. But no, I can see where he pulled this off really well, and there's other portions where it might have... You can see that's what he's doing, but it probably didn't quite pan out the way it could have or should have, and it looks mediocre, but not in the way that's intended. Like a little... It kind of crossed the line a little bit into... Oh, this isn't quite mediocre in the way it's intended to be or supposed to be. It kind of just fell off the rails a little bit. And that's not even going into, the batshit last half hour or so. Like, portions in the middle, you can kind of sense, oh, I don't think that was quite turned out as what it was supposed to be. But, starting off immediately, we start in 1993 at this institution that looks an awful lot like the House on Haunted Hill remake. And it's so over the top and so campy. Like, there's a point in time very early, one of the first big gore moments is a dude's arm getting broken and the bone comes out. and the way he like just looks at his arm and just screams at it is the moment it was like, oh, he's going for a certain vibe, like a certain campy sort of thing here, like, and that's gonna not just go into what happens and the gore factor, but the performances as well. And just the way, like, there's a doctor that comes in, and just the way the doctor is talking is just so over the top. It's like just regularly speaking is so over the top, and that's where you kind of get that whole, like, just give the movie some wear and tear visually, and it's something that you would find like it's like a film reel you would find at the bottom of some bin in somebody's garage or something. And it was like, oh yeah, this movie played at some grindhouse theater that hasn't existed for 30 years. Something like that, I think, is what the feel was supposed to be, and I feel like they probably could have gotten that point more across if they had done it like given it more of like a film look, rather than the obviously digital form that we have now, especially on HBO Max, where everything's going to look really super duper clear. That in itself might clash with the tone he seems to be going for here. But once we get a very shrouded opening where you can clearly see they're setting up that this is going to have, it's going to be gradually revealed what the fuck is happening. But in the meantime, we jump forward to the present, where we have a pregnant Annabelle Wallace, I think is who it is, from, what was it? I think I want to say she was in Annabelle, but I'm not sure if I'm getting that confused with her name or not. I'm pretty sure that was her that was in that. And she was in like Tom Cruise's mom. She's been around a little bit, and she's living in this house with her husband. The house already looks haunted, which is really funny because it's not really like the whole point of this going into it, which I think was heavily talked about long before it came out, was that like the reason Juan did this instead of The Conjuring 3 was he wanted to kind of get away from the haunted house thing. And that might be a bit jarring considering it does have that vibe at the start. Like I said, just looking at the house when nothing's happening yet, the house already looks haunted. And then the approach it takes seems like in the very first scene in the present day, that's the first big scare scene, does have the vibe of like, a supernatural movie in general. And a lot of it has vibes of Lights Out, David Samuel's movie from like 2016, I want to say. And Lights Out freaked me the fuck out. And it's like whenever I think about Lights Out, especially in the dark, it still freaks me out a little bit. And we're kind of in that territory there where we have the thing where we see like, dark silhouettes in the dark and then you turn the lights on and they're gone. It's like regardless of how many movies do that, that's the kind of thing that really gets to me. Like that's the kind of thing where that could be a trope for years from now, for like the next 20 years, and it'll never not freak me out. So, if you're gonna do one of the horror tropes, that'd be a good road to go down. We just talked about The Night House, which I really liked a lot, that utilized that really well also. And the way that, and sometimes they play with this. Like the thing I loved about The Night House was how it didn't really do the big score thing when it was doing that. This one kind of goes back and forth. Sometimes they do the really big score thing. Sometimes they just let us scare, just kind of linger there a little bit, which is nice. And that sort of, like, if you're gonna do like the big scares, the big loud scares, to do them with that kind of balance, to kind of at least alternate and go back and forth between here's the big loud stuff and then here's something that's just there. I feel like it does the loud stuff a bit more than usual in Wan's movies, especially when you look at like The Conjurings, where The Conjurings have absolutely shit your pants loud scenes, but the way they're used kind of sparingly, I think really made those movies strong and how they handled them. And obviously Insidious has like, a couple of those really, really big moments. One in particular is probably one of the more famous jump scares we've had ever now. But it does have some other elements that we've seen before, like the point of view of the threat. Like how I really loved the scene in the first Conjuring when we get the look of the house, but it's like the way it starts with the camera in the window like they're being launched. But here it's like as the threat is pouncing, we'll get point of view shots. which is, like I said, under Wan's direction, does more or less come off pretty well done. But at the same time, if it had been done just a little bit poorer, it would have been. I could have immediately dismissed it as, oh, we've seen all that shit before. But it's like, if it's executed in just the right way or just well enough, as far as somebody as talented as Wan can do, then it'll suit the scene well enough. But there is some stuff that feels a bit like we've been there, and some more famous stuff, some not as famous stuff. Like, I don't know how many people remember In Dreams with, I think it was Annette Bening and Robert Downey Jr. A lot of like the middle of this movie and where it's like really kind of taking off in what the horror scenes are, feels like it has a lot to thank that movie for. But it's still the stuff you would expect from him, like the use of production design and the stuff where it's like she's running around the hallways of the house, but the camera's following her from above and then just going through the maze of the house and stuff like that, where it's like Wong has the ability to be able to just do stuff like that and it never gets old to me. And the way he kind of is able to utilize that way, where like I said, he's basically made himself a signature now, which can either be, it can either seem really derivative or like it's just a director repeated themselves. Or there's the thing where, like I said, if where it feels more like a signature, and it's that thing that you're always happy to see when it comes. I guess how you feel about him as a director in general would be where you land on that. But since I'm overwhelmingly Wan fanboy more than not, that's the kind of thing that'll just work on me in general. They do try to throw in some comedy elements that don't really land much. A lot of it comes from the sister character, where like she has like a line about a casserole at some point, and then there's like in a post dramatic scene, when we're kind of in the aftermath of it, she shows up in like a ridiculous costume because of where she came from, and they try to squeeze like a comedic line out of that or a comedic moment out of that, and it's just there's a I mean appropriate but still kind of jarring reference to the Goonies. From one of the cops. There's two cops. There's the one that seems to be practically friends with everybody that's in the movie, and then there's the other cop who's just here to be like snarky and have the one-liners, and that's where it doesn't. None of those really like land. They're just kind of, they feel really out of place. But once again, you can kind of see where there's some sort of camp factor throughout the whole movie, and that's what they were going for. But, like I was saying, sometimes that'll land and sometimes it'll be weird, because there's one scene in particular where the doctor I was talking about, the doctor that was talking really over the top in the opening scene, is alone, and you can tell that he's about to get attacked, and, like, it's raining, and his window is open, and there's footprints on the floor, wet footprints on the floor leading from the open window. And this guy is so nonchalant about this that I can get the sense where this was a scene that was supposed to be like, oh, this is like so over the top, inexplicable, that it's the kind of thing you would see in like some 70s movie where like hardly any rules of real life applied in regards to the way the characters acted or something. But if that's what they were going for in this scene, they might have been stretching it because pretty much this whole scene is kind of inexplicable as far as the way this guy acts about the things that are happening. Like how the footprints lead into a dark closet, and we watch the light go out in this closet. So we literally see a window open that wasn't open before, the wet footprints leading into the darkness of the closet, and then the dude just sort of walks in there. Like, alright. And then he goes to bed. So, like I said, I can maybe see what they were doing there, but that's pushing it. But, you know, it's whatever. As you may have probably already heard, of course you've probably already seen the movie by this point if you're watching something like this, it's that last, like, half an hour or so that's getting all the attention. Where it's like, it's one of those cases where it's almost like the rest of the movie hardly exists because only this last part is going to be what people are really talking about. Which I can see is kind of like an overall criticism of the movie if like that whole first, hour and 20 minutes or so isn't like pulling you in enough that this whatever happens in the last half hour really overshadows it, for better or worse, depending on how you come out of it. Um, it is certainly pretty wild. I it is disappointingly really CGI heavy. Like there's a lot of CGI blood. There's a lot of when we see the threat moving around. It's like you can imagine that there's a chase scene where the threat is being chased by one of the cops, and in like looking at it, you can tell it's more or less an awesome scene. Like it's an awesome chase scene, but it would have been significantly more awesome if the threat wasn't so clearly animated looking. And that happens a lot in this last half hour or so, where everything just goes completely chaotic, and the CGI like really kicks in. Because when I think of one, I am at like the images I get feel very practical as far as how they're brought to life on screen. But this one seems to go pretty heavy on the effects, and it's especially because I think it's so gruesome, and like the idea of how much like CGI blood has really taken over. It's like it would feel like just how much more gruesome it might feel if that's the kind of thing you're going for. And I feel like with the era of movies this is trying to evoke, that's like if I was trying to do like that sort of 70s grindhouse like era, I feel like as a director one of the first things I would think going into this would be the gore has to be practical. And the gore almost seems like as prominent as the gore is, it almost feels like it was an afterthought in post production, rather than like that's something we really have to nail. So that I mean there's certainly some stuff that's pretty disgusting that looks relatively practical, but there's a shitload of gore, especially in that last half hour, and it's a lot of it is very like I said, very post production heavy, I guess you could say. So there is that, and then while it is very cool while it's happening, when it's like, all right, this is the direction they're going, and then as it keeps going, it's like this is pretty fucking wild. Okay, this is like this. Okay, I can see where we're getting like I don't have too many problems with that first part of it. But I mean, it's clear we were building up to something, and the payoff is absolutely a payoff. Like you're not gonna feel like it built up to nothing. Like it's not gonna feel like you waited and then it was a disappointing payoff. I don't think that's going to happen. But if on that though, I do think the solution, like the final solution as we get to the very end, as we're closing, is kind of stupid. Is well, I think it's really the execution, because the solution is a lot like another horror movie from a couple of years ago. It like gives me the vibes of that, and it was just much better executed in that movie. If you've seen *Malignant*, I would hope you know exactly what movie I'm talking about that has a very similar solution to this kind of problem. Uh, so, and I'm trying to figure out, like, if that like does it in completely, because, like I was saying, I don't like mind what all comes before, but it is clear that it's all kind of a build up to, and kind of a long build up, because the movie's nearly 2 hours when it probably doesn't have to be. But I mean, when it comes, it is huge. But I'm still wondering if it's a bit still weighed down from how the execution of the solution wasn't as good as it could have been. So yeah, but I mean, it's certainly wild and worthwhile. I think I'm pretty sure I'll see it again at some point. Probably around like this time next year or something. And when you're just watching horror movies in general, or marathoning one or something like that would probably be something I would do at some point. In like this nearing the fall area. So it's good for that, but I feel like under Juan's direction it could have been a lot better and less CGI heavy, but it's it's an experience, and like I said, it certainly reaches its payoff. So, which is more than you can say for a lot of movies. Um, so yeah, it's conflicting, but overall, I think it's probably satisfying enough. So, yeah. So let's go on to Queenpins, which is apparently a true. I was getting true story vibes from it, and I can't remember if it said at the beginning or not. If it was, I'm sure it did, but it's one of those cases where you're watching a movie that you know is based on a true story, but you're like, I'll bet 99% of this is fabrication. Like, 99% of this strays from it. And just kind of the general idea. Well, I didn't really look into the true story, and I don't really remember hearing about anything like it. But you do get the vibe. This seems like something that probably happened, yeah. To an extent. But, the main appeal, of course, is the fact that it stars Kristen Bell, who's one of the best people ever. And she's got one of her co-stars from The Good Place, who is Kirby Howell Baptiste. The guy that plays Sean on The Good Place is in it as well for like one scene as a doctor. So it feels like kind of a nice reunion. But the story is interesting, and they open you up to it in an interesting way. I feel like in a movie like this, introducing the characters might be one of the more tricky angles, given the directions they go and the fact that the movie's going to really try to get you to care about them, regardless of what they do. And so we see Kristen Bell, who is an ex-Olympic athlete. I think her sport was like race walking, I think is what they called it. So very off the radar. And she has an interesting relationship with her husband, who is Joel McHale. Joel McHale just kind of doing another thing where he's just in a movie. Like, they don't really utilize what he can do. He's just there so they can say that Joel McHale's in the movie. Like, that'll have like some sort of appeal. But that sounds insulting. But I mean, not utilizing him to his strengths for whatever reason. So many movies do that for some reason to him. But they have a very ironic relationship, given where this goes, considering he works for the IRS, and they can't get a baby, it seems. So there's this very interesting visual thing going on where they show her obsession with using coupons, which gets her into all this trouble in the first place. So she, like, racks up all this stuff and just does it for the sake of, like, doing, like the rush of using that and feeling like she's getting something for free or significantly less. Like, she racks up a whole bunch of stuff that's like $122, and then by the time she uses the coupons, it's like $16. And that's like it's almost like how she gets a fix of some kind. And so that visual of they've got this unused nursery that still has a crib in it, and it's got all the shit lined up on the walls that she gets from her coupons, and it's just basically like a small warehouse, just covering up what used to be this nursery. And it's like that whole thing, just that whole setting is a really creative way to show like what her life could have been and what it actually is, and how empty that probably feels. And then we get something we don't get as much with her friend, who is just like basically trying to be an entrepreneur and doing like YouTube videos and stuff like that, trying to sell herself unsuccessfully. And so clearly they've reached this point, and now they realize, after she complains about stale Wheaties, that all she has to do is complain and she'll get a free coupon, and then it's just a snowball effect of ideas until they're printing fraudulent coupons and selling them, and eventually they're millionaires. They can't quite spend that money because they don't know what they're doing, like crime-wise. And the whole idea of clean money and dirty money and all that becomes very confusing for them. And you can see the comedic setup here, and like it's clear the movie is a comedy. I didn't really find it that funny. Like, I can't really think of that many funny scenes off the top of my head. At least between them. There is another character that comes in, who is Paul Walter Hauser, who is perfectly cast. I feel like every time Paul Walter Hauser's in something, he's perfectly cast. um, yeah, really. And then he comes in here and he is called a loss prevention officer, who is somebody that's when we basically see him on the job, he is pointing out coupons that are either fraudulent or out of date or something, denying this old lady $2 off because he takes his job that seriously. And he's the kind of guy where you kind of think he's way overdoing, taking his job way too seriously. And like he even goes to the FBI when he starts to realize this potential coupon scam that Kristen Bell is running. And eventually, the movie actually finds a way to make him. So, because the thing about that the movie is doing is really trying hard to make all the characters in it sympathetic. Because one of the problems I kind of had with the movie as a whole was how it seems like it was being way too dismissive of the fact that they are the main characters are criminals. Like, it really wanted us to sort of love them unconditionally, it felt like. And I feel like they started to balance that out by making Paul Walter Hauser's character as sympathetic and giving him like he's talking to the person that's eventually running this investigation, who is Vince Vaughn, and he's basically telling him, like, this is like my purpose. It seems really pathetic because it is pathetic, but this is all he has going on, and this could be his big thing. And so to give like that character layers like that, I feel like kind of gave the movie a balance it really needed after a while. And his back and forth with Vince Vaughn and their chemistry is really good also. Like, I wouldn't mind watching a Vince Vaughn Paul Walter Hauser movie. Like, not even just these characters, but just kind of them in general. Would probably work really well. And be probably a funnier movie. And that's the thing though about it being a comedy that's kind of I'm really trying to figure out is I'm not necessarily saying the movie tries to be funny and fails. It might, because what I'm trying to say is that I just don't really remember like many comedic scenes, and I just saw it. So, I don't know. I mean, unless it's more in like I would say unless it's more in dialogue than it is in big comedic moments and broad comedy. But that's not entirely true, because this movie somehow finds a way to shoehorn gross out humor into it. We've got some puking for no goddamn reason, and we've got Paul Walter Hauser shitting his pants. So, there's that. And while the puking thing is completely gratuitous, interestingly enough, they set up the pants shitting thing, but it still feels incredibly out of place. Even in a movie that has an overall comedic vibe, if it's not exactly funny, the shit joke somehow still felt really out of place. So, yeah. And I'm somebody that just can't do... I mean, I've mentioned this before. I can't do the vomit thing. I'm one of those people that I literally can't watch that. It's like watching gore to me. And I literally cannot watch them. And I swear to God, every movie I've watched this week and every TV show I've watched this week have all had at least one scene of it. So all 3 of these movies did, and 2 shows I'm going to be talking about a little later did. So over the last 2 weeks, I guess. But still, it's a lot, and I'm really fucking sick of it. No pun intended. But apart from that, the thing about whether or not this movie works, a lot of it is on... And I know Kirby Hal Baptiste is here, and she's fine, but I mean, Kristen Bell's charm is like a whole thing in itself. And it's like, Kristen Bell's charm is going to basically make or break this movie and get us there. And it has to go a long way, and it can, and it does. So like if this movie was another actress, I don't know that it could have worked. Like, I was getting vibes of other movies, like every now and then, just a tiny bit, I would get The Hustle, which was probably one of the movies I hated the most from the last decade. So not necessarily in quality, but just like in like the general vibe. of, like, I guess the two friends that are criminals and stuff like that. But there was also the movie Masterminds with Owen Wilson that, honestly, I had completely forgotten about. Like, it was one of those cases where I was watching this and I was like, this reminds me of some random comedy. What am I thinking of? And I'm pretty sure it's that. The one, I think it was Owen Wilson and Zach Galifianakis, and I think Jason Sudeikis was in there. Which basically means that Queenpins is probably going to be this really forgettable movie, like, shortly after I'm done talking about it. So it's going to fall right into that camp, probably. And they'll probably end up blending together, and I won't be able to tell which movie's which, too. So there's that. But, yeah, it does have an energy to it that doesn't get annoying or anything. But like I said, it's... I think the thing that really holds me back is just how dismissive it is of the fact that they are committing crimes. And it may be like, they go into the whole thing about how it's victimless crimes and how they're, Robin Hood types and all that. But I mean, even so, it's very dismissive of that fact. And what's funny is that this is one of those movies that begins with the ending. Like it starts at a SWAT team descending on Kristen Bell's house. So, like, where it ends up. But it's like, even with that, it's like immediately being nonchalant about it. Like, because she has narration and stuff like that goes into it. And it's, yeah, like I said, it has, Bell's charm to take it all the way. My question throughout was if it might have benefited from being a little darker. Like, not, like, super, super dark, but it starts to go down some paths. Or it's like, if maybe they just went for that a little bit more. Like I said, maybe that also has something to do with the idea of it seems too happy with the fact that the main characters are criminals and it doesn't really matter too much, and how they're not really going to face much consequences regardless of the beginning. It just wants to be this really light comedy all the way through, and I feel like just little touches of something with like a little bit more bite might have been there might have been something there, but yeah, because it is like it's rated R, which might make you Jesus Christ, make you think that it has more of a bite or an edge or something like that. But I think they just pass the fuck quotient is really the only reason it's rated R. So, yeah. So it's like I said, it's fine. The charm takes it far enough, and it's not annoying or anything, which I was a little bit worried about with some of like the style choices and stuff like that. But it's fine, I guess. So let's go on to our last movie, which is Kate. Another Neon Lights assassin movie. And another Netflix movie. Just to get this, I don't want to dwell on this, because we can do this for every single one of the movies of this type, but it's a checklist. It's one of those goddamn checklist movies. There's Atomic Blonde, there's John Wick, there's Crank, there's fucking one of the worst, like probably the worst movie of this year so far, Gunpowder Milkshake, which was very recent. There is a movie with Ethan Hawke called 24 Hours to Kill that is also not that old. It's like maybe 4 years old or something. It's all here. Like, everything is here. They've got her dressed like Ripley. It's all... There's not an original idea in this movie anywhere to be found. And as I mentioned when I was talking about The Protégé, which I guess you can also chalk up into this category, these movies can get me really excited when they come out, because it's like, if there is a movie like this that's just like pure action, and it's not like, trying to overcomplicate itself or anything, and it does what it's trying to do well enough, then that's enough, and that's great. And I will take that. Like, there's like maybe 20 guilty pleasure movies that would fit this bill, that I just love and watch over and over again. But something has happened recently to this that I can't put my finger on. That I feel like it's where we're like kind of in the post-John Wick part of this. And it's... And like how everybody just kind of wants to do the John Wick thing. And it's just getting very, very, very repetitive. And yeah. And it's really... I'm so fucking tired of watching this movie. And it's like, when John Wick 4 comes out, they're going to have some really fucking original ideas. Otherwise, this is going to be played out. And since they fucking started it, maybe it serves them right. if that's what happens. But, yeah, but, you know, long story short, I'm really fucking tired of watching this movie, but here's another version of it. This time we have Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who doesn't really do anything wrong here. Like, if it's anything that appears to be being done wrong by her, it's probably, like, the direction. Like, she gets some really cringy moments that really play up just how much of a badass she's supposed to be, but I chalk all that up to the direction. I think Mary Elizabeth Winstead is the right choice for a part like this. Just not this movie. Unfortunate for her. It's one of those movies that really, really, really wants you to think that it's really badass and really cool, to the point that it's going to keep telling you that, like, right to your face. They're a shock surprise. She's got the whole crank, 24 hours to kill thing going on, where she's been poisoned, and then she's gonna die, but she has to get revenge on everybody that poisoned her or was behind that or whatever, and then it goes into other layers of shit. Other layers of plot that doesn't really matter and shouldn't matter in a movie like this. It's just there to keep the action moving, is all it is. And she's doing the whole thing where she'll fire guns in slow-mo, or she'll use a gun as a weapon other than shooting, or she'll do all this stuff. She'll kill people in like 20 different ways as the camera just moves around and tries to find every angle it hasn't hit yet. And that's the thing, is I hate to seem like action scenes are a lose-lose kind of thing, because it's like, over here you have the movies that there's way too many of, where all the action is just really, really cut to shit. Where, like, anytime somebody so much as moves their arm, there'll be a cut, and that just happens every time. And then over here you have the movies that we praise because there's less cutting, and there's more focus on the choreography and stuff like that. And the thing about that is, I'm getting ready to complain about the fact that it just feels like the camera is moving for the sake of moving, which seems like it would be a good idea for the simple fact that it's not heavily edited. But it's not necessarily just that. Like, that's not the only key to success, is to not do the overcutting. Because you still have to, like, have camera work that meshes well with the choreography, where they, like, complement each other. And this just feels like darting the camera around for the sake of doing it. Like, oh, let's shoot them from up here, let's shoot them from this angle, and all that, and let's circle the camera around them or something like that. And it just doesn't gel with what the choreography is, and it just feels like it's trying to be flashy for the sake of being flashy without using over-editing. So it's still... You wouldn't think it'd be as hard as it is. Looking at other movies makes it seem like making a competent action scene must be the hardest fucking thing in the world. And obviously a shitload of work would have to go into it, and, like, you know, weeks and, like, there's months of training and then, like, weeks of figuring out, you know, the camera movement and all that stuff. But I mean, if this is what you do for a living, you should have figured it out before the fucking movie came out. But yeah, we're still working on that, I guess. We're still, and this is the problem too. It's talking about us being in a post John Wick world, and I love the John Wick movies, clearly, but we're also in a post Raid world where the Raid movies have come out. And if anything should be the gold standard for movies like this, constant action movies, you would think it would be that. But it's only apparently taught a handful of filmmakers. So we're stuck with movies like Kate, like, constantly now. So we get stuff where they're trying to make Kate look super, super badass, because not only is she, like, dying, and not only can she kill people left and right, there'll be times where she'll shoot a dude in the head, and then she'll sit down and interrogate another guy while she's eating the food off the table. Why? Because she's such a hard ass, because she's so cavalier about being able to kill people left and right. And then if that's not enough, if we haven't hit all the cliche buttons yet, do you think they're going to bring a child into this that has to stick by her all the time? Do you think when this child shows up, we're going to get dialogue like Mary Elizabeth Winstead saying, "Stop following me," and "You're not my problem," and her saying, "Well, I have nowhere else to go, I have to stick by you," and all that shit? And do you think they're going to warm up to each other? Do you think they'll be buddies by the time we reach the climax? Do you think they'll care about each other? But The thing about this girl is also here to tell the audience how to feel about Kate. So she'll be here saying stuff like, here's an exact line, "You're a Terminator, bitch," or there is "You're you're a badass killer motherfucker." The girl says motherfucker a lot. I don't know what that's trying to accomplish. Like if she's supposed to seem cool or something. Um, but they're just really the desperation in that dialogue for the audience to think that Kate is the most badass killing machine they've ever seen in a movie ever is really embarrassing. Like they're trying so goddamn hard. Like you can feel them straining something. They're gonna pop fucking blood vessels trying to get us to think Kate is the coolest thing we've ever seen. And oh my god, when she walks into the climax wearing sunglasses with a cigarette dangling from her mouth and she's in slow-mo, it's like, what fucking decade are you in that this is the most badass thing you can come up with? That's what it is. It's embarrassing, really. But there's some things here. It's got a good cast. Woody Harrelson is kind of here in kind of a major part. I kind of wish he had gotten to do more, and this part would have been more. But and you can see just in general, like here's the thing: is when his character is introduced, I already thought he was the kind of character that he's ultimately revealed to be. Like I thought we were basically already there, but it's like it's a whole the whole movie's getting to that point. So, oops. And there's and there's who I actually quite like. Miyavi is in this movie, who ever since Unbroken, the first time I saw him, he's proven to be like a pretty strong actor with especially a really strong presence in general, and he and Mary Elizabeth Winstead probably have the best fight scene in the movie. That's in a kitchen, because it's the only fight scene that's not just really monotonous shooting and all the hey, let's see how many different ways you can stab a guy in a very CGI manner. This is another one. We were talking about the end of Malignant and all the fucking CGI blood. And it's like this is like tenfold, just CGI blood, CGI stabbings, and all that. And like I said, CGI blood can work in like Matthew Vaughn movies or something like that, or if you're doing like a video game movie and it can look like video game blood, sure. But for the most part, it just gets really, really tiresome, and it's like it just feels like there's no effort behind it despite the choreography. And yeah, there's just so much endless shooting after a while, especially it's one of those ones where the climax is just endless shooting, and you just have no stake in it whatsoever. You just really don't give a fuck. The story's not strong enough to have any impact behind which characters go and which ones are, which ones she has to face off against, all that stuff. There's just no feeling in it whatsoever. If there's one thing they add to this movie that gives it a bit of a, well, that feels kind of new to this, it would be the fact that, like, we've had stuff like the Ethan Hawke movie and Crank, where our lead characters are killers that are poisoned and have to get revenge and all that at the last minute. And they just kind of do their thing, and there's not too much of an effect apart from like slowing down. She's like full on deteriorating. So I just talked about the puke bullshit in Queenpins, but at least here it's for a reason, I guess. But the fact that she's like full on deteriorating by the end, where it almost feels like a body horror movie or something, it's kind of like, okay, that's interesting, but it's like way, way bogged down by, I'm so fucking sick of seeing the same movie over and over and over again. The same style, the same methods of killing, the same thin-ass storyline. I don't care. Like, I was just so bored out of my skull watching this movie that was trying so hard to be so energetic and so badass, and it's like watching a child flail in the pool that can't swim. You just have to wait it out until they like sink, which is what it does. So that's really all there is to that. So there it is. The next thing, we're gonna finish out the original Rocky franchise with 5 and Balboa, and then go on to some reviews. The TV stuff I was talking about, The White Lotus and Mayor of Easttown. I will be talking about. Just like in their whole seasons in just one video. And then we'll do some more review stuff and versus stuff and all that. So until all that next stuff, I think that's it.